The silence in the cathedral was louder than any scream. Elias stood at the marble altar, his hand encased in the trembling, ice-cold grip of a woman he barely knew. To the elite crowd gathered in the pews, this was a merger of empires, the strategic union of two rival tech dynasties. To the woman in the ivory silk dress beside him, it was a desperate protection. But to Elias, it felt like a slow-motion surrender of his soul. He felt a burning gaze from the very back row. He didn't have to look to know she was there. Zhara. His North Star. The woman who had been his partner in every sense, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual, since they were students with nothing but big dreams. She sat in the shadows of the final pew, her spine as straight as a blade, her presence commanding more power than anyone in the room. She wasn't making a scene, she was simply witnessing the impossible. "Do you, Elias Thorne, take this woman?" The priest's voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Elias's mind raced back to the midnight meeting 48 hours ago. The vulture investors had laid it out clearly: sign the marriage contract and merge the firms, or they would trigger a hostile takeover that would bankrupt Zhara's life's work, the foundation she had spent a decade building for her community. He was marrying another woman to protect Zhara's legacy. He was becoming the villain in her story to ensure she remained the hero of hers. "Don't trade your happiness for my ambition," she had told him when she sensed something was wrong. But he knew she would never accept the sacrifice if he told her the truth. Elias looked down at the gold band being slid onto his finger. It felt like a shackle. He risked one final glance at the back of the room. Zhara rose. Her eyes met his, and for a fraction of a second, the mask of the Black Queen, the moniker the business world gave her for her untouchable brilliance, slipped. He saw the raw, jagged confusion of a woman watching her partner walk away without a word of explanation. She didn't stay for the "I do." She turned, her heels clicking a rhythmic, lonely heartbeat against the stone floor as she walked out of the heavy oak doors. The room erupted in applause. Elias looked at his new bride, a stranger, and then at the empty doorway where his heart had just exited. He had saved her empire, but he had just lost the only person he wanted to share it with. Before we continue this incredible journey, I need to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments below. Whether you're in a bustling city or a quiet countryside, your presence here matters. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button right now. You don't want to miss a single moment of what happens next in this story. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this unfolds. Now, to truly understand the weight of what Elias had just done, you need to know where it all began. You need to understand the magnitude of what he was sacrificing. Because this wasn't just a wedding. This was a man cutting out his own heart and handing it to strangers, all while the woman he loved walked away thinking she meant nothing to him. 12 years earlier, Elias Thorne was a 22-year-old graduate student with holes in his shoes and fire in his eyes. He came from a family that had once owned half the telecommunications industry on the East Coast, until his father's gambling addiction and a series of catastrophic business decisions reduced the Thorne legacy to ash. Elias inherited nothing but a famous last name and a mountain of debt. He was working 3 jobs while pursuing his master's degree in computer engineering when he first saw her. Zhara Oyelaran. She was standing at a podium in the university's main auditorium, defending her thesis on sustainable technology investment in underserved communities. She was 23, brilliant beyond measure, and absolutely fearless. Her voice filled the room like music, each word precise, each argument devastating to the panel of professors who thought they could corner her with their questions. Elias had wandered into the wrong building, looking for his statistics class, but from the moment he heard her speak, he couldn't leave. He stood at the back of the auditorium, transfixed, watching this woman dismantle every challenge thrown at her with grace, intelligence, and just a hint of a smile that suggested she was enjoying herself. When she finished, the room gave her a standing ovation. The professors looked shell-shocked. And Elias knew, in that inexplicable way that the heart sometimes knows before the mind catches up, that his life had just changed forever. He approached her afterward, nervous for the first time in his life. She was surrounded by well-wishers, but she looked up as he approached, and something in her expression shifted. Later, she would tell him that she felt it too, that strange, immediate recognition of a kindred spirit. "That was remarkable," Elias said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Your model for community investment, I've never seen anything like it." Zhara studied him with those dark, penetrating eyes. "You understood it?" "I think I understood about 70% of it," he admitted. "But the 30% I missed, I'd love to learn." She laughed then, a rich, warm sound that seemed to light up the room. "Most men who approach me after a presentation want to explain my own research to me. You want me to teach you?" "I want to learn from the best," he said simply. "And I just watched the best." That was the beginning. Over the next 2 years, Elias and Zhara became inseparable. They studied together in late-night library sessions, fueled by terrible coffee and shared dreams. They challenged each other, pushed each other, refined each other's ideas until they became something greater than either could have created alone. Zhara had grown up in a small town in Georgia, the daughter of Nigerian immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give her opportunities. Her father worked double shifts at a factory. Her mother cleaned houses during the day and studied for her nursing certification at night. They had instilled in Zhara an unshakable belief that education was the key to everything, and that success meant nothing if you didn't reach back to lift others up. She had created her first community program at 16, a tutoring network that matched college students with kids in underperforming schools. By the time she was in graduate school, that small program had expanded into a vision for something much bigger, a foundation that would provide technology access, education, and economic opportunities to Black communities across the country. Elias believed in her vision with his whole heart. And she believed in his ability to rebuild what his family had lost, not through gambling or shortcuts, but through innovation and integrity. When they graduated, they made a pact. They would build their dreams together, side by side. Elias would rebuild Thorne Industries as a technology company focused on artificial intelligence and sustainable innovation. Zhara would launch the Oyelaran Foundation, dedicated to closing the digital divide in underserved communities. And when the time was right, when they had both proven themselves, they would get married. For 10 years, they kept that pact. Elias rebuilt Thorne Industries from the ground up, turning it into one of the most innovative tech firms in the country. Zhara launched her foundation, which grew from a small nonprofit operating out of her apartment to a powerhouse organization that had provided technology access to over 2 million children and job training to hundreds of thousands of adults. They were partners in every sense. They consulted each other on every major decision. They celebrated each other's victories and supported each other through defeats. They were so intertwined that the business world began to see them as a single entity, the Thorne Oyelaran powerhouse. Magazines wrote about them. Young entrepreneurs studied their partnership as a model for success. And through it all, their love only deepened. They never rushed toward marriage because they didn't need to. They knew what they had. They knew where they were going. The wedding would come when the moment was right, when they had accomplished the goals they had set for themselves as hungry graduate students with nothing but ambition and each other. What they didn't know was that their success had created enemies. powerful enemies who operated in the shadows, who had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The vulture investors came in many forms, but their leader was a man named Desmond Cade. He was old money, the kind of wealth that had been passed down through generations of ruthless accumulation. He had made his fortune by destroying others, buying struggling companies, stripping them for parts, and discarding the workers like garbage. He had no conscience, no loyalty, and no vision beyond the accumulation of more power. Desmond had watched the rise of Thorne Industries and the Oyelaran Foundation with growing irritation. These young upstarts, building empires on principles and passion? It offended everything he believed in. Business was war, and war was won through destruction, not creation. For years, he had been quietly buying up shares in Thorne Industries, hiding his purchases through a maze of shell companies and intermediaries. By the time Elias realized what was happening, Desmond controlled nearly 40% of his company's voting shares. But that wasn't enough for Desmond. He wanted to destroy everything Elias and Zhara had built. And he had found the perfect weapon. The wedding that had just taken place was not a merger of equals. Serafina Vance, the woman now wearing Elias's ring, was Desmond Cade's goddaughter. Her family's company, Vance Technologies, was merely a front for Desmond's operations, a legitimate face for illegitimate activities. By forcing Elias into this marriage, Desmond had accomplished multiple objectives at once. He had separated Elias from Zhara, weakening both of them emotionally. He had bound Elias to a family alliance that would give Desmond even more control over Thorne Industries. And most importantly, he had set in motion a plan that would ultimately destroy the Oyelaran Foundation, the legacy that Zhara had sacrificed everything to build. What Desmond didn't know was that Elias had discovered his true intentions. In that midnight meeting 48 hours before the wedding, when Desmond had laid out his ultimatum, Elias had seen the full scope of the plan. Marry Serafina, merge the companies, and Desmond would leave the Oyelaran Foundation untouched. Refuse, and Desmond would trigger a series of financial maneuvers that would bankrupt the foundation within months. Thousands of jobs lost. Millions of children cut off from the programs that were changing their lives. Zhara's entire life's work destroyed. Elias had made his choice in that moment. He would become the villain. He would break Zhara's heart. He would marry a stranger and surrender his own happiness. But he would not let them destroy her legacy. As he stood in that cathedral, watching the doors close behind the woman he loved, Elias felt something inside him calcify. He was a married man now. A man who had traded his soul for the protection of someone who would never know the price he had paid. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts and forced smiles. Serafina played her role perfectly, the blushing bride, radiantly happy. But when they were finally alone in the limousine heading to the hotel, her mask dropped. "I know you don't love me," she said quietly, staring out the window at the city lights. "I know this isn't real." Elias said nothing. What was there to say? "My godfather gave me two choices," she continued. "Marry you, or watch my family's company be destroyed. Just like he gave you two choices." She turned to look at him, and for the first time, Elias saw something human in her eyes. Something almost like sympathy. "We're both prisoners, Elias. The only difference is, I've had longer to accept my cage." She turned back to the window, and they rode the rest of the way in silence, two strangers bound together by a monster's machinations, both dreaming of the lives they had lost. Across town, in the penthouse apartment she had shared with Elias for the past 3 years, Zhara Oyelaran sat in darkness. She had not cried. She had trained herself years ago to channel pain into purpose, to transform hurt into fuel for change. But tonight, she could not find that transformation. Tonight, she could only feel the raw, bleeding wound of a betrayal she did not understand. 12 years. They had been building toward forever for 12 years. And he had thrown it away without a word of explanation. The engagement ring he had given her 2 years ago, a simple diamond that had belonged to his grandmother, the only piece of the Thorne legacy he had managed to save, sat on the kitchen counter where she had placed it when she came home. She could not wear it. She could not throw it away. So it sat there, catching the light from the city skyline, a small monument to everything that had been destroyed. Her phone buzzed constantly, friends, colleagues, board members, all wanting to know what had happened. The business world was in shock. The Thorne Oyelaran partnership had been so legendary that no one could comprehend its sudden dissolution. Rumors were already spreading. Theories were being constructed. By morning, the news would be everywhere. Zhara ignored them all. She sat in the darkness, replaying every moment of the past few weeks in her mind, searching for the clue she had missed. Elias had been distant. Distracted. She had attributed it to the stress of a major product launch at Thorne Industries, but now she wondered if she had been willfully blind. Had there been signs? Had he been pulling away for months, and she had refused to see it? Had their love been an illusion she had constructed to match the narrative she wanted to believe? No. She refused to accept that. Whatever had happened, whatever had caused Elias to walk away from everything they had built together, there was a reason. A reason he had not told her. A reason he was hiding. But that knowledge brought no comfort. Because whatever his reasons, the result was the same. He had married another woman. He had made his choice. And Zhara was alone. She looked at the ring on the counter one more time. Then she stood, walked to her home office, and began to work. Work had always been her salvation. Work was what she could control when everything else was chaos. Work would save her now, as it always had. The Black Queen did not cry. The Black Queen did not break. The Black Queen transformed her pain into power and used it to change the world. But in the quiet moments, in the spaces between emails and strategy documents and funding proposals, Zhara allowed herself one small, desperate hope that someday she would understand. That someday, the man she had loved would explain why he had destroyed everything they had dreamed of building together. She did not know that explanation would come sooner than she expected. And when it came, it would change everything. 3 months passed like an eternity. Elias Thorne had become a ghost of the man he once was. He went through the motions of his life, board meetings, product launches, public appearances, but there was no spark behind his eyes. The business world noticed. Whispers circulated that the golden boy of tech had lost his touch. Stock analysts wondered aloud whether the merger with Vance Technologies had been a mistake. They had no idea how right they were. The marriage to Serafina existed only on paper. They maintained separate residences within the Vance family estate, appearing together only when public events demanded it. Serafina, to her credit, never tried to pretend there was anything genuine between them. She was as much a prisoner as Elias, bound by her godfather's schemes, and she had developed her own coping mechanisms. Mostly, she drank expensive wine in crystal glasses, consumed alone in her wing of the mansion, numbing herself to the reality of her captivity. On the rare occasions when she and Elias spoke, it was with the weary familiarity of fellow inmates, not friends, not enemies, simply two people sharing a cell. Desmond Cade, meanwhile, was making his moves. With Elias bound to the family through marriage, Desmond had increased his control over Thorne Industries. He had installed his own people on the board. He had redirected research and development away from Elias's sustainable technology initiatives toward more profitable and more destructive ventures. Military contracts. Surveillance systems. The very opposite of everything Elias had built his company to represent. Elias fought back where he could, but his position was weakening daily. The marriage contract contained provisions that he had been too desperate to fully understand at the time. If he divorced Serafina within 5 years, control of his company would automatically transfer to the Vance family. If he violated any of the contract's terms, the same result. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, watching everything he had built be twisted into something unrecognizable. And through it all, he watched Zhara from a distance. The Oyelaran Foundation had not just survived his departure, it had thrived. In the months since the wedding, Zhara had launched 3 new initiatives, secured record-breaking funding, and expanded operations into 7 new cities. The business press marveled at her resilience. She gave interviews about the importance of focusing on mission over personal pain. She smiled for cameras and shook hands with donors and never once mentioned Elias's name. The Black Queen had risen from the ashes of their partnership, more powerful than ever. But Elias knew better than to believe the public performance. He had spent 12 years learning the subtle geography of Zhara's face, and even in photographs, he could see the shadows under her eyes that makeup could not quite hide. He could see the slight tension in her jaw that appeared when she was controlling her emotions with iron discipline. He could see the emptiness behind her professional smile. She was hurting. And he was the cause of her pain. The worst part was knowing that she didn't understand why. She thought he had simply abandoned her, traded up for a richer, better connected bride. She thought their love had meant nothing to him. And he could not tell her the truth. The marriage contract included a strict non-disclosure provision. If he revealed Desmond's threats or the true nature of the arrangement, the foundation would be immediately targeted. So Elias stayed silent. He played the role of the faithless partner, the man who had sold his soul for corporate power. He let the woman he loved believe the worst of him, because the alternative was watching her life's work be destroyed. Late at night, in the cold emptiness of his room at the Vance estate, Elias would pull out his phone and scroll through old photographs. Zhara laughing at a joke he had made during a beach vacation. Zhara concentrated and fierce during a late-night work session. Zhara asleep in his arms, her face soft and unguarded, the only time the Black Queen ever let her walls fully down. He had thousands of these photographs. 12 years of memories, captured in digital form. Some nights, they were the only thing that kept him from giving up entirely. On the other side of the city, Zhara was fighting her own battles. The Foundation's success had come at a cost. She had thrown herself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession, routinely logging 18-hour days and sleeping on the couch in her office more often than in her own bed. Her staff worried about her. Her friends tried to intervene. But Zhara was not interested in intervention. Work was the only thing that kept the pain at bay. As long as she was busy, as long as there were problems to solve and lives to change, she didn't have to think about Elias. She didn't have to wonder what had gone wrong. She didn't have to feel the gaping wound in her chest where her heart used to be. But the truth had a way of making itself known, and it was about to come for Zhara in a way she never expected. It started with a phone call. Zhara was in her office late one evening, reviewing proposals for a new technology center in Atlanta, when her assistant knocked on the door. Yemisi, a sharp young woman who had been with the Foundation since its earliest days, looked unusually nervous. There's someone here to see you, Yemisi said. She says her name is Serafina Vance. Zhara felt every muscle in her body tense. Serafina Vance. Elias's wife. The woman who had taken her place at his side. What could she possibly want? Send her away, Zhara said, returning her attention to the proposal. She says it's about Elias. She says. Yemisi hesitated. She says his life is in danger. Zara's pen stopped moving. For a long moment, she didn't breathe. Then, slowly, she looked up. Send her in. Serafina Vance entered the office with the careful movements of someone who had been drinking but was trying very hard not to show it. She was beautiful in a fragile, porcelain way, pale skin, auburn hair, designer clothes that hung on her thin frame. But her eyes were red-rimmed, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her designer handbag. Thank you for seeing me, Serafina said. Her voice was steadier than her hands. I know I'm the last person you want to talk to. You're correct, Zhara said coolly. So I suggest you say what you came to say quickly. Serafina nodded. She looked around the office, at the photographs of smiling children in computer labs, at the awards and recognitions lining the walls, at all the evidence of a life built on purpose and meaning. When she turned back to Zhara, her eyes were wet. I'm not here to apologize, Serafina said. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here because my godfather is going to destroy everything, and Elias is too stubborn to save himself. I don't know what you're talking about, Zhara said. And frankly, I don't care. Whatever happens to Elias is no longer my concern. He married me to save your foundation. The words hung in the air like smoke. Zhara felt the world tilt slightly, as if the floor beneath her had shifted. Excuse me? Serafina moved to one of the chairs facing Zara's desk and sat down heavily, as if her legs could no longer support her. My godfather, Desmond Cade, had been planning this for years. He bought up shares in Thorne Industries, positioned himself to take control. But that wasn't enough. He wanted to destroy you too. Your foundation, your legacy, everything. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folder of documents. 3 months ago, he gave Elias an ultimatum. Marry me and merge the companies, or he would trigger a financial attack that would bankrupt your foundation within 6 months. He had the connections, the resources. He could do it. We both knew he could do it. Zhara stared at the folder but didn't touch it. Her mind was reeling, struggling to process what she was hearing. That's not possible. Elias would have told me. He would have. The marriage contract includes a non-disclosure agreement, Serafina interrupted. If Elias reveals the true nature of the arrangement to anyone, Desmond has the legal authority to immediately execute his attack on your foundation. Elias signed it. He signed everything. He gave up his freedom, his future, and you, all to protect something you didn't even know was in danger. The room was spinning now. Zhara gripped the edge of her desk, forcing herself to breathe. Why are you telling me this? You're violating the same agreement. Because my godfather is going to kill him. The words cut through the chaos in Zara's mind like a blade. She looked at Serafina, really looked at her for the first time, and saw something she hadn't expected, genuine fear. Elias has been fighting back, Serafina explained. Quietly, carefully, but fighting. He's been documenting Desmond's illegal activities, insider trading, fraud, bribery. He's building a case to take to the authorities. If he succeeds, Desmond will go to prison for the rest of his life. And Desmond knows? He suspects. That's enough. Serafina's voice broke. I overheard him on the phone last night. He was talking about making the problem disappear. About an accident that would solve everything. She was crying now, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. I know I'm not a good person. I know I've been complicit in all of this. But Elias has been kind to me. He's the only person in my entire life who has treated me like a human being instead of a pawn. I can't let my godfather kill him. Zhara sat in silence, her mind racing through everything she had just learned. Elias had not abandoned her. He had not chosen wealth or power or another woman over their love. He had sacrificed himself, his happiness, his freedom, his reputation, to protect her. He had become the villain in her story so that she could remain the hero of hers. And now he was going to die for it. Now I have a question for you. If someone you loved made an enormous sacrifice for you without telling you, and let you believe they had betrayed you just to protect you, could you forgive them? Would the love survive the deception, even if the deception came from a place of protection? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know what you would do in Zhara's position. What do you need from me? Zhara asked. Serafina pushed the folder across the desk. Everything Elias has gathered is in here. Copies of documents, recorded conversations, financial records. He hid them where my godfather would never think to look, in the one place no one would expect him to protect. Zhara opened the folder. On the first page, in Elias's familiar handwriting, were the words, "For Zhara, if something happens to me. I'm sorry I couldn't explain. Everything I did was for you. Everything I am has always been yours." She closed her eyes, letting the tears finally fall. 12 years of love. 3 months of agony. And now, a chance to save the man who had sacrificed everything to save her. How long do we have? Zhara asked. Days. Maybe less. Desmond is moving quickly. Zhara stood, her expression transforming from grief to determination. The Black Queen was rising again, but this time, she wasn't fighting for her foundation or her community. She was fighting for the man she loved. Then we need to move faster, she said. Tell me everything. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. Zhara moved with the precision and intensity that had made her a legend in the business world. She called in every favor she had ever earned. She contacted journalists, lawyers, federal investigators. She worked through the night, coordinating a response that would bring Desmond Cade's empire crashing down before he could execute his final move. But she knew it wouldn't be enough. The legal process took time, and time was the one thing they didn't have. She needed to get Elias out of that house. Serafina had been surprisingly helpful. She provided security codes, staff schedules, information about her godfather's movements. She was taking an enormous risk. If Desmond discovered her betrayal, she would face the same fate as Elias. But something had shifted in her during those months of captivity. Watching Elias sacrifice himself for love had awakened something she thought she had lost long ago, the courage to stand up for what was right. The charity gala is in 2 days, Serafina told Zhara during one of their clandestine meetings. My godfather always uses these events to make major announcements. He's planning something. I can feel it. What kind of announcement? I don't know. But he's been meeting with his lawyers constantly. And he's been watching Elias more closely than ever. Whatever he's planning, it happens at that gala. The gala was a massive annual event hosted by the Vance family, ostensibly to raise money for various charities but really to display their power and influence. all of society would be there, politicians, celebrities, titans of industry. It was the perfect stage for Desmond to make a move. It was also the perfect stage for Zhara to make hers. She spent the next day planning. She reached out to allies she had cultivated over years of foundation work, people in media, in government, in law enforcement. She called her closest confidants and explained just enough to secure their help. And she prepared herself for what was coming. Because Zhara understood something that Desmond Cade did not. He saw her as a sentimental fool, a woman whose success was built on idealism rather than cunning. He underestimated her because she led with compassion instead of cruelty. That was his mistake. The Black Queen had not earned her name through kindness alone. She had earned it through an absolute refusal to lose. She had fought her way from a small town in Georgia to the heights of American philanthropy. She had outmaneuvered skeptics, outworked doubters, and outlasted every obstacle that had ever been placed in her path. Desmond Cade was about to learn exactly how the Black Queen handled her enemies. On the night of the gala, Zhara arrived alone. She was dressed in a gown of deep burgundy velvet, the color of old wine and dried blood. Her natural hair was styled in elaborate braids woven with gold thread. Diamonds sparkled at her ears and throat, pieces she rarely wore, reserved for moments when she needed armor. She moved through the crowd with the grace of a predator, drawing stares and whispers from everyone she passed. The business world had not expected her to appear. Since the wedding, she had avoided any event where Elias and his new wife might be present. Her appearance tonight was already sending shockwaves through the assembled elite. But Zhara was not interested in shockwaves. She was interested in victory. She spotted Elias across the ballroom. He was standing with Serafina and Desmond, the picture of an obedient son-in-law. But his posture was tense, his expression guarded. When he saw Zhara enter, something flickered across his face, surprise, fear, longing, before he quickly looked away. Zhara did not approach him. Not yet. She had a schedule to keep. First, she made her way through the crowd, greeting acquaintances, making small talk, being seen. She wanted everyone to know she was there. She wanted Desmond to feel her presence before she made her move. At precisely 9 o'clock, the orchestra fell silent and Desmond Cade took the stage. He was a tall man, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the kind of patrician features that looked good on campaign posters and wanted lists alike. He smiled at the crowd with the practiced warmth of a lifelong manipulator. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "thank you all for joining us tonight. As you know, the Vance family has always been committed to giving back to our community." Zhara tuned out the platitudes, watching instead the security guards positioned around the room. Serafina's information had been accurate, there were twice the usual number, all of them watching the exits. And it is in that spirit that I'm pleased to announce a major new partnership. As many of you know, my goddaughter Serafina recently married Elias Thorne, uniting two of the great families in technology. Elias's jaw tightened. He looked like a man preparing for a blow. And tonight, I'm honored to announce that Thorne Industries will be merging fully with Vance Technologies. Elias has agreed to step down as CEO, allowing our merged company to pursue exciting new opportunities in defense and security technologies. The crowd murmured. Elias's face went pale. This was not the plan. Desmond was moving ahead of schedule, forcing Elias out before he could complete his case against him. Furthermore, Desmond continued, his smile widening, "I'm sad to report that the Oyelaran Foundation has been experiencing significant financial irregularities. Federal investigators will be announcing an inquiry next week." Zhara felt a cold anger settle in her chest. So this was his play. Frame her foundation for financial crimes, using forged documents and bribed officials, while simultaneously seizing control of Elias's company. A double blow that would destroy them both. But Desmond had made one crucial miscalculation. He thought he was the only one with powerful friends. Zhara reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. She typed a single word and hit send. Now. The ballroom doors burst open. Federal agents in blue jackets flooded into the room, moving with precision toward the stage. At the same moment, the giant screens behind Desmond flickered and changed, displaying documents and photographs that made the crowd gasp, evidence of money laundering, bribery, fraud, and conspiracy. Evidence that Elias had gathered. Evidence that Zhara had delivered to the right authorities. Desmond's face went from smug to shocked to furious in the space of 3 seconds. He tried to move toward the exit, but agents were already closing in. Desmond Cade, the lead agent, announced, his voice cutting through the chaos, "You are under arrest for racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy, and a list of charges too long to read at this venue. You have the right to remain silent." The crowd erupted in chaos. Cameras flashed. People shouted questions. In the middle of it all, Desmond's eyes found Zhara across the room. The look he gave her was pure venom, the impotent rage of a man who had finally met someone he could not destroy. Zhara held his gaze and allowed herself one small, triumphant smile. Then she turned and walked toward Elias. He stood frozen, watching the scene unfold as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. Serafina had quietly stepped away, disappearing into the crowd, her role in the evening complete, her own future uncertain but finally free of her godfather's control. Zhara stopped in front of Elias. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. 12 years of partnership. 3 months of separation. A lifetime of love that had never actually ended. "You married another woman to save me," Zhara said quietly. "I would do it again," Elias replied. 1,000 times. "To protect you, I would do anything. You should have told me. I couldn't risk." "I know." She reached up and touched his face, feeling the familiar landscape of his features, the warmth of his skin. "I know why you did it. I understand. But Elias, don't you know by now? We're partners. In everything. You don't get to sacrifice yourself alone. Not when we can fight together." Elias closed his eyes, and she saw the weight of 3 months finally beginning to lift from his shoulders. "I'm so sorry, Zhara. I'm so sorry for the pain I caused you." "We'll talk about that later," she said. "We'll talk about everything. But right now, there's something more important." "What?" Zhara took his hand and laced her fingers through his. "Right now, I'm taking you home." The cameras caught the moment, the Black Queen and her partner, reunited in the midst of chaos, walking out of the ballroom hand in hand while federal agents carted away the man who had tried to destroy them. The photograph would be on every news site by morning, the image of a love that had survived the unthinkable. But Zhara wasn't thinking about the cameras or the headlines. She was thinking about the man beside her, the weight of his hand in hers, the way his fingers tightened around hers as if he would never let go. They had a long road ahead. There were lawyers to deal with, assets to untangle, a marriage to annul. Elias's reputation would need to be rebuilt. Trust would need to be restored. The wounds of the past 3 months would take time to heal. But they would face it all together. As they always should have. Outside the gala, the night air was cool and clean. Zhara's car was waiting at the curb, her driver holding the door. As she and Elias approached, he suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said. Zhara turned. "What is it?" Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out something that glinted in the light from the street lamps. A ring. The same simple diamond that had belonged to his grandmother, the ring she had left on the counter the night of his wedding. "I took it," he admitted. "I went back to the apartment after you left for work one day. I couldn't bear the thought of you throwing it away, and I couldn't bear the thought of leaving it there. So I've carried it with me. Every day. A reminder of what I was fighting to get back." He looked at her, his eyes shining with tears he had been holding back for 3 months. "I know I can't ask you to marry me. Not now. Not after everything. But I need you to know that this ring, this promise, has never changed. It will never change. Whether you want me or not, whether you can forgive me or not, I will spend the rest of my life loving you." Zhara looked at the ring, then at the man holding it. The man who had given up everything for her. The man who had broken her heart to protect her soul. She held out her hand. "Ask me," she said. Elias's breath caught. "What?" "Ask me, Elias. Ask me to marry you." For a moment, he just stared at her. Then, slowly, he lowered himself to one knee, right there on the sidewalk outside the most prestigious social event of the year, with police lights flashing and photographers still snapping pictures from a distance. "Zhara Oyelaran," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "will you marry me? Not someday. Not when we've accomplished our goals. Now. As soon as possible. Because I don't want to spend another day without you." Zhara smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one she had worn in 3 months. "Yes," she said. "Now get up off that sidewalk and come home with me." The weeks that followed were not easy. Elias's marriage to Serafina was annulled quietly, the documents revealing the coerced nature of the arrangement making the process surprisingly straightforward. Serafina herself had provided testimony to the federal investigators, her cooperation earning her immunity from prosecution. She disappeared from public life shortly after, retreating to Europe to figure out who she wanted to be when she wasn't anyone's pawn. Zhara found that she couldn't hate Serafina, not after everything. The woman had been as much a victim as any of them. And in the end, she had found the courage to do the right thing. That counted for something. Desmond Cade's trial became the biggest news story of the year. The evidence Elias had gathered was damning, and it kept growing as more victims came forward. Former business partners who had been destroyed by his schemes. Employees who had been silenced or threatened. Politicians who had been bribed. The scope of his corruption was staggering. Elias testified, of course. He took the stand and detailed every moment of the midnight meeting, every threat, every manipulation. He described the impossible choice he had been given and the sacrifice he had made. When the prosecutor asked him why he hadn't simply gone to the authorities immediately, he looked across the courtroom at Zhara. "Because I couldn't risk her foundation being destroyed before I could prove anything," he said. "The people who depend on that foundation, millions of children, hundreds of thousands of families, they were more important than my own freedom. They're still more important than my own freedom." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Desmond Cade was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. At his age, it was effectively a life sentence. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But for Elias and Zhara, the work was just beginning. Thorne Industries was in shambles. Desmond's manipulation had corrupted the company from the inside, turning it into something Elias barely recognized. Many of the original employees, the people who had believed in his vision, had left in disgust. The ones who remained were demoralized and distrustful. Elias wanted to walk away. Start fresh somewhere else. But Zhara convinced him otherwise. "This company is your legacy," she told him one night, as they sat together in her apartment, their apartment again, going through financial documents. "It's not the buildings or the contracts or the stock price. It's the ideas. The vision. The promise of technology that helps people instead of hurting them. You can't let Desmond's poison be the final word." So Elias rebuilt. Again. He fired the executives Desmond had installed. He brought back the employees who had left, the ones who had believed in his original mission. He restructured the company around principles of sustainability and social responsibility. It was painful and expensive and sometimes felt impossible. But this time, he wasn't doing it alone. Zhara was there every step of the way. Not as a silent supporter, but as a partner. She challenged his decisions when she thought he was wrong. She supported him when she thought he was right. She brought her own expertise in community development and social impact, helping him see opportunities he had missed. For the first time, their partnership was truly equal. The separation, as painful as it had been, had taught them both something important. They were stronger together, yes, but only when they communicated openly, when they shared burdens instead of carrying them alone. 6 months after the gala, they got married. It was a small ceremony, nothing like the cathedral spectacle that had marked Elias's fake wedding to Serafina. They held it in the community center that had been the Oyelaran Foundation's first permanent home, a converted warehouse in a neighborhood that had been written off by everyone except Zhara. The guests were an eclectic mix: tech executives and community organizers, politicians and the children from Zhara's programs, old professors and new allies. Yemisi served as maid of honor. Elias's best man was Coffee, his college roommate who had never stopped believing in him, even during the darkest months. When Zhara walked down the aisle, she wore a dress designed by a young woman who had gotten her start in the Foundation's fashion technology program. The fabric was adorned with subtle patterns that told the story of her parents' journey from Nigeria, a tribute to the legacy she was continuing and expanding. Elias cried when he saw her. He wasn't ashamed of it. After everything they had been through, he had earned those tears. The vows they exchanged were simple. No grand promises or flowery language, just honest words about partnership, commitment, and the kind of love that survives the unthinkable. "I promise to always tell you the truth," Elias said, his voice steady despite the tears on his cheeks. "Even when I think the truth might hurt you. Even when I think I'm protecting you by staying silent. I promise to trust you with my burdens, because you've shown me that carrying them alone only makes them heavier." "I promise to always fight beside you," Zhara replied. "Not behind you, not in front of you, but beside you. Partners. Always." When they kissed, the community center erupted in cheers. The reception was a joyful chaos of music and food and dancing. Children from the Foundation's programs ran between the tables, laughing and playing. Old friends told embarrassing stories. New alliances were formed over plates of jollof rice and champagne toasts. At one point in the evening, Zhara found herself standing alone at the edge of the dance floor, watching Elias try to teach one of the young boys a dance move. He was laughing, his face lit up with genuine joy, and she felt her heart swell with love so fierce it almost hurt. A woman appeared beside her. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked locks and the sharp eyes of someone who had seen too much and survived it anyway. "Your mother would be proud," the woman said. Zhara turned. Ante Kechi. I'm glad you could make it. Kechi had been her mother's closest friend, and after her mother's passing 5 years ago, she had become Zhara's most trusted confidant. She was one of the few people who knew the full story of what had happened, not just the public version, but the private pain that still sometimes surfaced in quiet moments. He's a good man, Kechi observed, watching Elias with the children. He made a terrible decision, but he made it from love. That counts for something. It counts for everything, Zhara said. Kechi nodded. Your mother used to say that the measure of a person isn't the mistakes they make, but what they do when they realize they were wrong. Elias realized. He tried to fix it. And when he couldn't fix it alone, he let you help. She paused. That's harder than people think. Letting yourself be helped. Zhara thought about that for a moment. I almost didn't go to the gala that night. Serafina came to see me, told me everything, and part of me wanted to walk away. To let Elias deal with the consequences of his choices. What changed your mind? I realized that his choices had been my choices too. For 12 years, we built everything together. The foundation, the company, our relationship, all of it was intertwined. If I walked away from him in his darkest moment, I would be walking away from everything we had created. And I couldn't do that. Not to him. Not to myself. Kechi put a hand on her niece's shoulder. You've become wise, Zhara. Wiser than your mother was at your age, and she was the wisest woman I ever knew. Zhara smiled. I had good teachers. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the celebration. Then Kechi spoke again. So what now? The trial is over, the villain is in prison, you're married to the love of your life. What comes next? It was a good question. For months, Zhara had been so focused on the immediate crisis, saving Elias, stopping Desmond, picking up the pieces, that she hadn't thought much about the future. But now, standing on the other side of the storm, she could see the horizon again. We build, she said. Together, this time. No more separate empires. Thorne Industries is going to partner with the Foundation on a new initiative, bringing technology access to every underserved community in the country. Elias has the resources, I have the relationships. Together, we can do what neither of us could do alone. Kechi raised an eyebrow. That sounds ambitious. It is. But so were we, once. 2 broke grad students with nothing but dreams and each other. She looked at her aunt with the fierce determination that had always defined her. We're not broke anymore. And we still have each other. Imagine what we can build now. Kechi laughed, a rich, warm sound that reminded Zhara painfully of her mother. I look forward to seeing it, child. I look forward to seeing everything you become. The song changed, and Elias appeared at Zhara's side, slightly out of breath from his dance lesson with the children. Dance with me, he asked, offering his hand. Zhara took it. Always. As they moved onto the floor together, swaying to a slow song that had been their favorite since their graduate school days, Zhara felt a peace she hadn't known in months. Maybe years. The world was still full of challenges. There would be more enemies to face, more obstacles to overcome. But she wasn't facing any of it alone. Thank you, Elias murmured against her ear. For what? For forgiving me. For fighting for me. For not giving up on us when I gave you every reason to. Zhara pulled back slightly, looking into his eyes. I didn't forgive you because you deserved it. I forgave you because I love you, and love means making the choice to stay, even when staying is hard. I love you too, Elias said. More than I know how to say. Then don't say it, Zhara replied, pulling him close again. Show me. Every day, for the rest of our lives. Show me. They danced until their feet hurt, and then they danced some more. And when the reception finally wound down and the last guests departed, Elias and Zhara stepped out into the cool night air, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Together. 1 year later, the Thorne Oyelaran Institute opened its doors. It was the culmination of everything they had dreamed about, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to bringing technology education and resources to underserved communities across the country. The building itself was a marvel of sustainable architecture, designed by a team that included several alumni of the Foundation's programs. Solar panels covered the roof. Gardens provided fresh produce for the on-site cafeteria. Every detail reflected the values Elias and Zhara had built their lives around. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was a major event. Senators attended. Tech industry leaders flew in from around the world. Journalists from every major outlet jostled for position. But Zhara made sure the real guests of honor were the children and families who would be the first to benefit from the Institute's programs. Standing at the podium, looking out at the crowd, Zhara felt the weight of the moment. Her parents had not lived to see this day. Her father had passed 3 years ago, her mother 2 years before that. But she knew they were with her somehow, their spirits woven into every brick and beam of this building. When I was 8 years old, Zhara began, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd, my father bought our family's first computer. It was an ancient machine, third-hand, with a cracked screen and keys that stuck. But it changed my life. It showed me a world of possibilities I had never imagined. It taught me that knowledge was the key to freedom. She paused, letting the words settle. Today, we're giving that same gift to millions of children who might never have had the chance otherwise. We're opening doors that have been closed for too long. We're saying that in this country, your zip code shouldn't determine your destiny. The crowd applauded. Zhara glanced at Elias, who stood to the side with their son in his arms, a beautiful 6-month-old boy they had named Solomon, after Zara's father. Yes. A son. The surprise had come just 3 months after their wedding, unexpected, unplanned, and perfect. But I didn't do this alone, Zhara continued, her eyes still on her husband and child. None of this would have been possible without my partner. My best friend. The man who sacrificed everything for me, even when I didn't understand why. Elias Thorne, would you join me up here? Elias handed Solomon to Yemisi, who had become the child's honorary aunt, and walked to the podium. He looked healthy now, the shadows of his imprisonment finally faded. His eyes were clear and bright, and when he took Zara's hand, the cameras caught something they didn't need to be told to see: love. Real, enduring, unshakable love. A year ago, Elias said, speaking into the microphone, I was in the darkest place of my life. I had made a choice that I thought would cost me everything: my company, my reputation, the woman I loved. I did it because I believed it was the only way to protect her. I was wrong. He turned to face Zhara. What I learned is that protection isn't about sacrifice. It's about partnership. It's about trusting the people you love to fight beside you, not shielding them from battles they're more than capable of winning. Zhara didn't need me to save her. She never did. She needed me to be honest with her, to share my burdens, to believe in her strength the way she's always believed in mine. He looked back at the crowd. This institute is our promise to a new generation. It's our promise that the talents and dreams of every child in this country matter, regardless of their background. And it's my personal promise to never again make a decision alone that affects the people I love. Partnership. Honesty. Trust. Those are the foundations of everything worth building. The crowd rose to its feet. The applause was thunderous. And in that moment, standing beside the man she loved, with their son cooing in Yemisi's arms, Zhara felt complete. The journey had been long. The pain had been real. But they had emerged stronger, their love forged in the fire of impossible choices. That night, after the ceremony, after the speeches and the photographs and the endless handshakes, Elias and Zhara returned to their home, a brownstone in the city, chosen for its proximity to both the Foundation headquarters and the new institute. Solomon was asleep in his crib, watched over by the night nurse they had hired to help with the impossible task of raising a child while running two major organizations. The house was quiet, peaceful. Zhara stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. She felt Elias come up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "We did it," he said softly. "We did," she agreed. "But it's just the beginning." "I know. There's so much more to build. So many more communities to reach. So many more children to help." Zhara turned in his arms, facing him. "And we'll do all of it. Together." She saw the love in his eyes, the same love that had been there since that first meeting in the university auditorium, the love that had survived 12 years of building, 3 months of separation, and the fire of public scrutiny. "I've been thinking about something," Elias said. "Oh? That cathedral. The fake wedding. Standing up there with Serafina, knowing you were in the back of the room." He paused. "I never got to say my real vows. The ones I would have said if it had been you at that altar." Zara's heart fluttered. "Tell me now." Elias took both of her hands in his. "Zhara Oyelaran Thorne. You are my conscience and my courage. You challenge me to be better than I am and accept me for who I am. You see the best in me even when I can only see my failures. I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of your love. I promise to stand beside you in every battle, celebrate you in every victory, and hold you through every sorrow. You are my North Star, my Black Queen, and the only home I ever want to know. I love you. Now and forever." Zhara felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She had thought, after everything they had been through, that she was done crying. Apparently not. "Elias Thorne," she replied, her voice thick with emotion, "you are the most stubborn, infuriating, self-sacrificing man I have ever known. You made me believe in partnership when I thought I could only rely on myself. You showed me that strength isn't about never needing anyone, but about choosing who to need. I promise to spend the rest of my life reminding you that you don't have to carry the world alone. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your home. I love you. Now and forever." They kissed, a seal on promises that went deeper than any legal document or public ceremony. When they finally pulled apart, they were both laughing through their tears. "We're quite a pair," Elias said. "The best," Zhara agreed. "Now come to bed. We have a meeting at 7 and a baby who's going to wake up at 4. The glamorous life of philanthropic executives," Elias said with a grin. Hand in hand, they walked toward their bedroom, toward the rest of their lives. Behind them, the city sparkled with a million lights, a million stories, a million struggles, a million triumphs. Their story was just one among many. But it was theirs. And it was far from over. 5 years later. The commencement ceremony was held on the campus of the university where Elias and Zhara had first met, in the same auditorium where she had defended her thesis all those years ago. But this time, she wasn't a nervous graduate student. She was the keynote speaker, addressing a new generation of young people ready to change the world. Solomon, now 5 years old with his mother's sharp eyes and his father's easy smile, sat in the front row with Elias. Beside them were Elias's mother, who had finally found peace after years of struggling with her own demons, and Kechi, whose silver locks now had more gray but whose eyes still sparkled with wisdom. Zhara approached the podium, looking out at the sea of caps and gowns. These young people were the future engineers and teachers, doctors and artists, entrepreneurs and activists. They would go on to build the world she and Elias had always dreamed about. Graduates, she began, I stand before you today as someone who has learned the hardest lesson there is: love requires more than sacrifice. It requires truth. She saw Elias smile in the front row, knowing exactly what story she was about to tell. 16 years ago, I met a man in this very auditorium who would become my partner in everything. We built companies and foundations, fought battles and celebrated victories. And then, 5 years into our journey, that man made a choice that nearly destroyed us both. The crowd leaned forward, intrigued. He was given an impossible ultimatum: marry another woman, or watch everything I had built be destroyed. He chose to protect me, by sacrificing himself. He became the villain in my story so I could remain the hero of mine. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. It was the wrong choice. Not because his intentions were bad, they were beautiful, selfless, loving. But because he made it alone. He didn't trust me to fight beside him. He didn't trust me to share the burden. And in trying to protect me from pain, he caused pain that took years to heal. She looked directly at Elias now. What I learned from that experience is that real partnership, in love, in work, in life, isn't about one person carrying all the weight. It's about sharing the load, even when the load is ugly and heavy and terrifying. It's about trusting the people you love to be strong enough to face the truth. She turned back to the graduates. You will face impossible choices in your lives. Moments when the easiest path seems to be doing everything yourself, bearing every burden, keeping the people you love in the dark for their own protection. I'm asking you to resist that temptation. Find your partners, your colleagues, your friends, your loves, and trust them with your struggles. Be honest even when honesty is hard. Share your battles even when you're afraid of looking weak. Her voice rose, passionate and powerful. Because here's what I've learned: the strongest foundations are not built by individuals. They're built by communities. By partnerships. By people who trust each other enough to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to admit when they're struggling. That's how we change the world. Not through heroic individual sacrifice, but through collective courage and honest love. She smiled, thinking of everything that had led to this moment, the pain and the healing, the betrayal and the forgiveness, the love that had survived the unthinkable. Graduates, go forth and build. Build companies and organizations. Build families and friendships. Build movements and revolutions. But never build alone. Find your people. Trust them. And together, create a world where no one has to sacrifice everything just to protect the ones they love. The auditorium erupted in applause. Graduates rose to their feet. In the front row, Solomon was clapping wildly, his small hands creating a rhythm of pure joy. Elias met her eyes across the crowd, and in his gaze she saw everything they had built together, the past, the present, and the future they would continue to create. After the ceremony, The family gathered for dinner at a restaurant they loved, a small Ethiopian place run by a woman who had gotten her business degree through one of the foundation's programs. The walls were decorated with photographs of success stories, and in the center of the main wall was a picture of Elias and Zhara at their wedding, flanked by photos of the institute's opening and the foundation's 10th anniversary celebration. Solomon was regaling his great-aunt Kechi with stories about his kindergarten class, demonstrating the animated storytelling skills he had clearly inherited from his mother. Elias sat beside Zhara, their hands intertwined under the table, watching their family with quiet contentment. "You know," Elias said softly, so only she could hear, "if someone had told me that day in the cathedral that we would end up here, married, with a son, running a foundation together, I would have thought they were crazy." "Because you were too busy being a martyr to imagine a happy ending?" Zhara teased. "Something like that." He squeezed her hand. "I'm grateful. Every day. For you. For Solomon. For this life we've built." "As you should be," Zhara said with a grin. "I'm an excellent life partner. The best." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Around them, the restaurant hummed with conversation and laughter. Outside, the city moved at its endless pace, millions of people living their own stories, facing their own challenges, finding their own forms of love. But in this moment, Zhara was exactly where she wanted to be. With her family. With her partner. With the man who had once sacrificed everything for her and had learned, through painful experience, that true love wasn't about sacrifice. It was about partnership. About truth. About building together. The Black Queen and her king had found their victory. Not through battle, but through the kind of love that survives the unthinkable. And their story, their real story, not the headlines or the gossip or the public image, would continue for decades to come. Now, if you've made it this far, you're not just watching a story. You're part of a community that believes in love, redemption, and the power of partnership. So here's my request, and I'm asking sincerely, if this story touched your heart, if it made you think about the people in your own life who you would sacrifice for and who should be sharing your burdens, then share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear that they don't have to carry their struggles alone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do it now. Every subscription helps us tell more stories like this one, stories that remind us what really matters. You've given me your time. Now give me your subscription, your share, and your comment. Tell me what you would have done in Elias's place. Tell me about the partners in your own life who you trust with your truth.